Welcome back.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Last time we had you here was for David Cronenberg's Eastern Promises a few weeks ago, but this is a very special one for you. I know that you have a long and kind of treasured relationship with Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki-san. You want to go back to the beginnings of that, the origins of you meeting his films?
Well, I was born in '64, so I grew up with his career. One of the first cartoons I saw as a kid was Wolf Boy Ken, which in Mexico was called Pepito, El Niño Lobo. Very strange, but everybody's called Pepito in Mexico for some reason. And Pepito, El Niño Lobo was, what is curious is, as a kid, I always sustained that kids have an incredible visual training by nature. And if you don't lose it, you can identify styles. And as the years went by, I grew up watching Gulliver's Travels in Space, Puss in Boots, all the toy and Nippon animation that he did with Takahata. And I kept recognizing things. And I kept saying, this is like that, and this is like that. And little by little, I started discovering who was behind all this.
Without knowing that it was this one animator?
Without knowing it, no. And then in the 70s and 80s, when anime started exploding worldwide, I started then getting Lupin III, and seeing the sequence where Lupin has the fight in the crumbling towers with the clock tower and all that. I thought, that's the same guy that did Puss in Boots, because it's exactly the same dynamics. And I went back, and sure enough, that's when I said, oh, Miyazaki. And then little by little, back then, the circle of anime fans was very small, you know, and you could have a dialogue with very few people. Collecting the movies was hard, but I went back and started to watch his movies, and then I came up on Totoro, right. And I was just completely destroyed. You know, my wife and I, we didn't have kids back then, and Miyazaki says very, very wisely and beautifully, he says that nostalgia doesn't only belong to adults or old age people, that kids have a huge sense of nostalgia, even when they are kids. And my wife and I saw Totoro for the first time, and we started bawling, right? Because everything was so perfect, everything was so beautiful, the feel of belonging to a moment of your childhood so fully. Everything was just so perfect, it made you weep for who you were at that precise moment. and what happened is, then we made it a habit. I got my hands into one of my most treasured possessions to this day, which is the complete letterbox set of laser discs with all the Miyazaki movies, which was hard. I didn't have money. I saved for like a year and a half. I drove like 80 miles to a little store in California, and one trip where I was going to get the foam latex, and I drove to get, and it's a treasured possession. And my daughter, Mariana, who's here with me, we're gonna watch the movie with you guys. Mariana is here, and Mariana, when she was a baby here, Mimic, we were shooting Mimic, and she wouldn't stop crying, neither would I. I would cry because I was shooting Mimic. She was crying because she was a baby, and so was I. and we tried Disney, we tried this, nothing worked. And then I said, let's put Totoro. And we put Totoro, magic.
Really?
Completely quiet, pacifier jumping up and down. And I think Miyazaki has that quality that he connects, he can recall a connection with childhood in a way that I think very, very few filmmakers of any kind have ever made. But as I said, my relationship with Ghibli, Miyazaki, Takahata, their masters at Toei came since I was a kid.
So set for us, I mean, I think you probably just gave a great summary of it, but maybe set for us where, from your perspective, Miyazaki sits in the sort of the history of animation and why he has this like towering reputation.
I'll be as brief as I can, because it really is about how he falls into a context in a unique way. I think now more animation is tackling things that are powerful and sophisticated, within the genre in a non-adult way, still directed to kids, but at the time he stood alone, basically. What happens is, animation for me is precious. I have done animation. I have animated myself. I produce animation and so forth. I have a very, very strong relationship with it since I was a kid. And what it is, I guess it's a little bit like ice cream in a way. Why? Somebody was talking to me the other day about why ice cream is so addictive. And, I don't know why they thought I would say that.
Exactly.
But
You're the one with the food metaphors. Right?
They said, because nothing like ice cream exists in nature. And after that chat, I started to read a little more about it from a mammalian point of view. And it's the most basic thing in you as a mammal. Identifies two sources of energy immediately that are impossible to find in nature: fat and sugar. And you go, I'm crazy for this. And I can testify. And I think animation has the same power. If cinema has a relationship with, or art in general, has a relationship with reality, animation has perhaps the strongest one in a way, because there's nothing like it in nature. And before we had the capability of film ourselves or photograph ourselves, the earliest artistic act man ever did is draw. Mm-hmm. Draw himself, draw his surroundings or her surroundings, and draw the hunt, and this and that. And that is a primal connection, the same way that music has a primal connection, going back before we became sophisticated storytellers. Mm-hmm. And there is something to be said by the fact that animators, their main tool, no matter how sophisticated we get with CG or this or that, one of the basic tools of any animator is a mirror. Because you essentially have to depend on the pantomime of yourself to find the character. And I think that then you trace it back even to the word, which is animate, mm-hmm. which is to infuse a soul. To infuse a soul to something animus, to give life, And I think that then you start seeing that now we live in a world, in the West at least, where we think animation is a genre and not a medium. It is a medium, and it is not just for kids, and it's not just for simple stories with gags for an hour and a half, and it is something that can be used to tell incredibly powerful stories, And in the origins, you have then a very close relationship in the West and the East in the origins of anime. If you go back to Osamu Tezuka, who created the most famous creation of his in animation was Astro Boy. On the beginning, again, I grew up with Tezuka as a kid. I see Astro Boy, I see Princess Knight, I see Leo the Lion, Kimba the White Lion. Everything he created, for some reason, was exported to Mexico immediately. And so I was a Mexican otaku at a very early age. But Tezuka has a relationship with the Fleischers, with the design of Max Fleischer and the Fleischer Studios, that is of admiration, of course, with Disney. Mm-hmm. And then those two pillars, Disney and Fleischer, have a lot to do. I think I'm covering the microphone. And they have a lot of links with anime. A lot of people sustain that Fleischer influenced the fact that the animation in anime became wide-eyed characters, big, round eyes, through Betty Boop and through his admiration of Disney and so forth. But and the race between Fleischer and Disney, I sustain that today one of the things we're going to see is a moment that I believe, I've never been able to prove it, but that is influenced by Fleischer's Superman shorts, if you can access them. The way the robots moved in one of the most famous Superman shorts influences not only the shape of the arms of the Laputa robots, but the movement.
Yeah.
And
I think you're probably right. There's also some of the pencil drawing in here. It feels very, very similar to.
I think Fleischer, Winsor McKay has a little bit. I think if you watch Winsor McKay's The Sinking of the Lusitania, you see a little bit of an echo of that when Laputa, when the island is crumbling and the people are falling. There's a little bit of that pre-James Cameron high at sea tragedy in the Lusitania footage that McKay created. But what happens is then animation in Japan surges with real strength when Tezuka connects with television.
Right.
You know, it was very small before, but then Tezuka creates Astro Boy, which becomes a gigantic success. And he's doing it with very few cells. I mean, animation, what is amazing, and we'll talk about it a little bit before we see the movie, is it's 24 frames that are drawn. Nothing exists. And the amazing thing of Miyazaki, which we will see somewhere here today, is when he spends that time creating X number of frames in either throwaway moments, like when a rock starts getting drops of water and it humidifies a little bit, like almost like a contemplative Terry Malick moment, but it's animated. Yeah. He didn't have the rock, he didn't have the rain, he's creating it from scratch. Or mistakes. Miyazaki has a lot of failed gestures in his films. One of my favorites, or my favorite, is in Totoro, when the dad is putting on his shoe and he misses a couple of times and then he gets it right. An American animator would just have him put the shoe. But Miyazaki knows that's character. And for example, Miyazaki understands that all character comes from movement and how they are interpreted. And since the animator is the actor in a way, and so is the director, he needs to do it particularly well. John Lasseter quotes the example of that beautiful moment when Mei and Satsuki are running through the house, and Satsuki runs really like a girl with longer legs but also more control of herself, and Mei runs behind her and opens and does everything she does but as a kid. And that's an essential thing of Miyazaki. Now, to go quickly, the anime business becomes a business that is really, really hardcore. Production is super fast. They are skipping frame. They're animating as few frames as possible to make a weekly show in Japan meet a deadline. And within these ranks of compression come Miyazaki and Takahata. They arrive to this industrial environment with great dreams. You know, at that moment, there's a great work of Eastern animation called The White Snake. Yep. And they all aspire to do things of that beauty, but they find themselves confined by the system. And Miyazaki and Takahata, from that moment on, become great champions of the art of the creation of anime. You know, that the fact that animation can be a work of art. And they create, it'll culminate in them creating Ghibli Studios as a place that defends the workers as artists. You know, they create a haven or a hell, depending, because they're super strict. They demand like no one else in Japan, but at the same time they create an incredible haven for creation. And they immediately start doing in-betweeners. You know, in-betweeners are the guys that, in between two big, how many of you guys are animation geeks? Ah, lovely. How many of you are animators? Even
wow,
more
that's
lovely.
Great.
That's great. Well, the fact is, in between is, between the two big movements, there's someone that draws the intermediate stages of that big movement. And they start like that. Little by little, they get control. Miyazaki is a superb character designer, as is Takahata. They start designing characters, storyboarding. Miyazaki starts directing small sequences. You know, there is a moment in which animators are sent to America to interview with Disney, to learn from Disney animation and this and that. Miyazaki is a big fan, for example, of Ivan Derl, the designer, the modernist painter that designed and transposed all the modernity of 20th century painting with medieval illustration, and created that fusion in Sleeping Beauty. You know, and you can see that influence in Puss in Boots, yep, which is, by the way, a glorious piece of animation. And they start creating their own idiosyncrasies, and little by little in the series, they start being so successful in the animated series that they start being given a little bit more leeway. Miyazaki then, of course, does Lupin III, which becomes one of the most influential anime features in the early stages of the golden era of animation, to the point where it is said that the wedding dress of the Princess of Japan was influenced by the wedding dress in that anime. And they gain a little bit of independence and then they do Nausicaa, but still not as Studio Ghibli. It's still, they don't control everything, but it's so successful that then they are given the chance to do this. And Miyazaki stands...
And that's where we end up with this film, right? Which is the very first Ghibli.
This is the Song of Independence
Yeah.
for it. And for many people, mostly the people that are a little more critical of Ghibli, they say it's the best movie. That's a typical trick of people that don't like you. I love your first movie. I think you're peaked there.
Kronos is pretty good.
Kronos is pretty good. I don't know about the rest, but of course the people that don't like the politics or the stance of Ghibli, whatever, they tend to say that. But it is without a doubt a masterpiece we're going to see. And that word is thrown around easily, but it is completely justified here. Now, why?
Yeah.
Why does it stand? Look, there are many, from a technical standpoint, obviously, one of the things I love of Japanese animation is that stubbornly, they from the very origins, they hold to something that for me is very symbolic, that is 5 fingers in the hands. They don't go with the Mickey Mouse 4 fingers in the hands. And the fact is they then start bringing the quirkiness and they come from a theatrical tradition that is so strong, the no theater, kabuki, and they bring a pantomime to it that you can see in the early stages that they're mimicking the compression and the squash and stretch of the Disney animation, but then they go beyond that and they get into their own arena. Now, one of the things Miyazaki does that is gorgeous, and I think he culminates it first in a TV series called Heidi, and if you think that animation needs very few gestures to create the sense of a face, it's part of our training as mammals to try to recognize a face with only a circle, 2 points, and a little line. Yeah. That's a face. But Miyazaki creates faces of great beauty in Heidi for the children, the elder people, blah, blah, blah. And here, I must say that the faces he creates in this movie are perhaps amongst the most beautiful, simple, deceivingly simple, masterful face designs and character designs in the history of the medium. They are absolutely gorgeous.
Are you thinking especially of the pirates for that?
Pirates, Patsu and Sheeta are amazing. I mean, they're such simplicity. And is the first time, this is his first real sort of big gesture of a film. He had done others, but you can see him culminate. For example, there's a great TV series that I urge you guys to look at it if you haven't seen, called Conan, Boy of the Future, which is where he tries a lot of these gestures. Now, the thing is, he did that in collaboration with some of his older masters from Toei, and there's a great difference. There's a great sequence in Conan that is very, very famous, where Conan lands on the ground and you feel the gravity, and then he does this and catches the girl, and it's super heavy. And Miyazaki said, no, the gravity should be real, but the style should be more nimble. And this is after Lupin, which is masterful at being nimble. He creates here 2 of the things that are the hardest to do in animation: gravity and grace. Those are 2 things that are incredibly hard. How do you know a CG effect is shit? Because it looks weightless, number one.
It's not in an atmosphere.
It doesn't exist.
Right.
In the same way that I flatter my daughter when I say to her, your drawings have real gravity. And she says, it's just, you're my dad. No, they have gravity. Mine don't. But it really is the idea that a muscle is working, that is making contact with the floor, blah, blah, blah. And then Miyazaki does something.
And there's several specific scenes in there, and it's very interesting, isn't it? Because when you're actually, up in the castle, when you're actually, they make it into the clouds, you get this sense of almost artificial gravity, that's actually around it, that it operates in kind of a scientific world of its own, but a recognizable one.
Well, he says in one interview, he talks about it, and he says that the idea of the stone at the center of the castle gave him the license to alter gravity a little bit. That's why the camphor tree in the center of the castle grows so big. Right. And the camphor tree, which is the fusion, the great thing about Nausicaa is without a doubt a work that is more linked to European or Western science fiction in a way than it is in a way to Japanese lore and tradition. Lupin, which is a masterpiece, is still more linked to the origins of a Buster Keaton chase or a caper movie. It has perhaps one of the best car chases since French Connection, but without a doubt it's linked to all those things. What is amazing is that you see Miyazaki come together on this movie. Everything he did before confluences. We talked about Conan, Boy of the Future, which has essentially the same villain, in a way, has the beginnings, the sketches of every great flying machine here. Obviously, Miyazaki's massive crush with flying, obsession, really.
Mechanical things.
Mechanical
it's something we're going to
things.
spend, I think, a lot of time with afterwards. But so, you can't avoid them, of course. But the incredible machinery, and almost the kind of we were talking about it before, is this kind of Victorian machinery that then takes on a futuristic hue, and how important that is in these movies.
He's, after all, the son of an engineer, of an industrial designer, but also you see the culmination of everything he learned on another great series called Sherlock Hound. You see the culmination of, and you will see it again on Kiki, you will see it again in all his European Howl, all those trips they did and all that research they did for Pippi Longstockings or Heidi. Miyazaki's Europe is a Europe made of sugar and bread and everything beautiful, sugar and spice and everything nice. It really is, you cry, because there's no place in the world that looks like Miyazaki's Europe. and that is also culminating here. The idea that Miyazaki has this sense where he says kids around 10 to 12, in their minds, are heroes. And in their minds, nothing is impossible. And his movies are, in essence, paeans or poems towards the lack of impossibility for a kid of pure heart, And he says it very poignantly. And it's interesting to do it also that the moment Miyazaki is cosping, even Tezuka has somewhat given in his manga to the more hardcore movement of what they're Japanese called dramatic pictures, which is sort of the underground of comic, where Tatsumi, for example, starts creating really dark fables of contemporary Japan where all the values are being corroded, there's illicit sex, there's abortions, there's sweaty brows.
A lot of poverty.
A lot of poverty, the disadvantage, the resentment towards higher classes, blah, blah, everything. And Tezuka gives in a way with, for example, his manga about human insects, He calls them human insects. And Miyazaki, however, stays completely faithful to what he believes this medium should be. And he maintains that this medium should be a way for people to get back in contact with what is ideal, get in contact with what is pure in them, what is beautiful and transcendental.
In many ways, this movie sets up a whole series of metaphors that he's going to use over and over again about that striving, about what those might be, right?
Including the camphor tree, that is going to come back in a massive way in Totoro, and that is a component of, a very strong component of Japanese lore that connects with the spirits of elementals in the woods that are going to come back again, Mononoke and so forth. But it's also important to say this is the first time he's articulating, even if he's set in a fictional Wales, that he was very affected by a year he took two years before this. He went to Wales and saw the end of a minor strike of mining industry. But it is entirely Japanese in the way he approaches the myth.
I was going to ask you that, whether you want to point the audience in the direction of it, because while it is idealized, this is about nostalgia. There is a definite political undercurrent in this movie and in all of his films. And how would you point people in that direction here, or what to look for?
Miyazaki was always a guy that was very active in labor, in union, in protecting the rights of the workers. Early on in his career, he was very vocal about basically creating a manifesto through different mediums about what the work of an animator should be. So he's a guy that definitely has that slant. And one of the things that I think is incredible, that I have a kinship with, enormous kinship with, is he says, he basically creates worlds where the fantastic is never, by design, the moral negative. They can be blind forces of nature that destroy things, but they, like the pigs in Mononoke. But they are, ultimately, when you dig a little bit, the root of it is a very human evil. You know, it can be the weapons, it can be the ambition, it can be greed, it can be this and that. And I think ideologically, he's basically saying, there's no way of mistaking it, the higher classes in this movie are the villains.
Yeah.
The institutions are the villains, the army, the rich, the powerful, the government. So it's a gigantic, there's a strike of anarchism in a way, or at least of a reaction that is liberal, you know? Mm-hmm. That is a very liberal reaction to all the structures that are held sacred in many ways, in kids' movies especially.
And I guess before we wrap up, maybe we want to talk a little bit about the actual animation techniques too.
Yes.
I mean, because things become, and obviously as it becomes a richer studio and it moves along, you know, things become quite seamless and, you know, very beautiful. But here he's still working in sometimes quite basic technique.
Yes.
And
but nevertheless, the amount of work, there are many things that distinguish a Ghibli film from anything else, and especially now that a lot of the handmade part of animation is lost. You know, one of them is they have perhaps the most amazing set of background painters ever assembled in the history of the medium. So I can only tell you that the paint color they order the most is green. The second one is blue. I can guarantee you, and by the end of this movie, you'll know I'm right. But they use. We've had the chance of visiting Ghibli a few times, and seeing the paint room and seeing the people working by hand still to drool like a beast in front of the backgrounds, trying to steal one while no one's looking, unsuccessfully. But that's one of the things. Technically, Miyazaki is still hand carving a lot of stuff. And in here, of course, this is of a moment in which that was not extraordinary. What is extraordinary is A, the level of care, B, the way he elevates now, I think in a way that distinguishes from Nausicaa and Lupin, the amount of time he spends in the frame, the amount of frames he spends. For example, a quick run is you do 6 frames per step. A super quick run from a kid is 4 frames per step. But a gesture in animation that is industrially assembled, the less frames you draw, the more economically wise you're being. And Miyazaki tries to do the most perfect animation, is not rotoscope based, is completely from the mind and the hands of the animators. That's amazing. And
really, there's no technique.
There's no rotoscope. He says to his animators, he always says, if you don't spend an afternoon watching a dog, you cannot animate a dragon, basically. You know, it's like if you don't spend time watching people move, you cannot animate people. And it really is amazing to see 2 things that he does. He gets speed. You're going to see some feats of grace and speed that are incredible. The scene where Shita is rescued from the melting prison, where the robot is crawling behind, has been copied or emulated and executed much more poorly, but dissected by live action filmmakers, animators all over the world.
You tipped your hat to that one, I think.
Well, crudely. You try to do things impossible. You cannot do it physically, and yet they don't look unnatural. They look like the ultimate incarnation of Harold Lloyd or Buster Keaton or one of the great silent comedians. But Patsu is better than any of them, more graceful than any of them, and more powerful because of that. And when you see the movie, the opening is also then grace. It's one of the most grace-infused animated sequences ever. How many of you have not seen the movie? Okay, I'm not going to spoil it. We'll talk about it after. But you see that, and technically, the movie, we can talk after about why it's so difficult, especially because a lot of you are animators or into animation. But there are moments where the vehicles go really close to the ground, the flying vehicles, and the way they really transmit that power, or the moments of grace where they go above the clouds, and how every gesture is carefully observed, technically is an absolute breathtaking film. When I went to visit Brad Bird, when he was post-producing, not yet finished, with Iron Giant, I saw Iron Giant still in pencils and this and that, and I said to him, I still don't believe him, but I said to him, oh, you must love Miyazaki. He says, I've never seen a Miyazaki film. I go, no. You know?
Wouldn't his boss have forced him to? Lasseter is the biggest.
Well, that was
Miyazaki
pre-Lasseter. That was, But he said back then, I've never seen. I said, you gotta watch it, blah, blah, blah. But I'm pretty sure someone had Laputa in Rewind, and you'll see the mass, and you'll see how he is great at making things that are very small and beautiful, or gigantic and powerful. Yeah.
Pay attention to flying machines, a little bit of politics, and the incredible techniques of Hayao Miyazaki. We'll see you after the movie. Thanks, Guillermo.
See you there.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back, Guillermo del Toro. So that was the first time you saw that movie on the big screen.
On 35, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think?
I loved it. I mean, every second of it. Yeah.
Anything that you hadn't seen before? Anything that leapt out?
No, what is great is, I mean, this is, we are looking at an artifact of a lost era, because the most complex animation we're watching now, like the falling apart of the big architectural pieces of Laputa, would be done now digital. It would be done with computer. And to think, I was with my daughter and I was saying, to imagine to animate that, just the pieces falling apart, and it's so beautiful. And to see, you get, I mean, I got a shock, sort of, a lot of the influences of Miyazaki that I know are there, but just to see them, like the moment Patsu takes off his shoes and runs, that's pure Conan.
Yeah.
Pure Conan. The interior of Laputa, the cubes, is very much he was a big fan of Metal Hurlant, heavy metal, of course of Mobius, with whom he collaborated, but also of a guy called Kaza, or Kaza, I guess, who was amazing, and I could see the influence there for the first time. I go, oh, Kaza is there.
The sequence with how the cubes move.
Well, the way the colors are applied, the shapes, Kaza was a big influence in me. Mm-hmm. So I know that, like, Kaza used to do this sort of ornamental scarring in his creatures, which I took and ran with it. But I could see everything. I mean, it's like, for some reason, the scale makes you pay more attention to things,
Let's talk about also, in a big room like this, all these people, the silences.
Yeah.
So when they hit Laputa, the power of that is quite astonishing. And we were just talking backstage, saying that there's something, 2001, when they first enter the cloud. The cloud,
and you have the slit scan effect of the lighting. But you know what is amazing is there's a saying in film that, especially with any of the sound nods, they say silence is made of 3 tracks. Like there's very few filmmakers that actually go nothing.
Totally quiet.
Yeah, they would have a wind or a frequency, or this is like absolutely balls to the wall silence. It's really, it requires a purity of concept that is not everyone can do. It's. I remember the first time. It adds
so much tension. I mean, when they're in the garden, you're anxious.
No, and the arrival, when he goes, and then, because he goes, silence, and it's like when I saw 2001 for the first time in the Cinerama Dome, for the first time in Cinerama, so I saw it, and I go, I've never seen it. and one of the things that impressed me the most of the opening were the silences Kubrick has, where you go, oh my God, now they have weight. So that impressed me really.
Amazing. And let's go back to some of the themes we were talking about before.
Oh, I forgot to say, another great thing with Miyazaki always, especially for me, the food. Everything looks, there's no purer water than the Miyazaki water, and no tastier food than the Miyazaki food. I'm going to fry a couple of eggs tonight.
Exactly. Always the food. And what a meal she was able to whip up on the airship. It looked great.
But also, one of the things that you get from Miyazaki, and this is worth noticing, is his characters enjoy everything. And there's a saying about Jack Benny that I always stuck in my mind. Jack Benny, they said he would be eating something and he would go, "Oh, this ice cream is amazing." And I kind of relate to that. But what I love is Miyazaki's guys enjoy the purity of everything. You know, the music, the embrace. I love when Sheeta and Patsu fall on the grass,
in the park,
embracing. Yeah. In an American movie, they would have almost kissed, but they explode in laughter, and it's just so beautiful.
Let's talk about the pirates, who of course are fantastic by the end of the movie, but they're actually quite odious and menacing at the beginning, and he really sets them up as really
formidable
enemies.
Yeah. But what I love is Miyazaki does this evidently in every movie. The ambiguity of the characters that you start thinking are the villains, and end up being sympathetic. Something that I've tried also. I tried it before becoming familiar with Miyazaki even, but the fact that I think that you can love the bad guys without any moral qualm. I think it's very, very telling that he opens the movie from the pirate's point of view. You know, the first image you see is from the pirate's point of view. So I think it's very, very telling. Another thing that I was noticed for the first time is there is a great interview with Miyazaki where he's talking about Nausicaa and this and that, and there's a pause in the interview, and Miyazaki says, "Don't you think Nausicaa has a huge bosom?" and the interviewer is like, "Yes." He says, "I did it so she could embrace all the people in the town and comfort them for their loss. It needed to be a big, generous bosom for them to really..." And at the ending, I was like, "That's a big bosom."
Yeah, Dola, yeah.
That's a big bosom.
Mama's pretty stacked.
Yes,
it's true.
Yes.
It's
and she has children that come from basically every nationality,
including walrus. It seems.
Including a walrus. So that bosom has been put to great use.
The other great thing about it's true. The other great thing about the pirates too is that they it's on the final shot. Basically, the last shot is honor among thieves, right? Yeah. So the contrasting how the army's looting is actually evil, but theirs is actually for the good.
Not only that, is by accident or not, is rational.
Right.
They have a few. They got a little bling. But it's rational. What I think is that when you were talking about politics, obviously, there's always the edge that people talk about, how nostalgia for the past is always dangerous politically. But what I love is that you're seeing definitely the pirates, the outlaws, the marginal people are the heroes in the film, evidently.
Yeah, that does feel like, just based on the costumes and things, it feels kind of Edwardian, the whole thing. And, it's obviously a time of great socio-political strife as well. And I guess the giveaway was, which I kind of only noticed here on the big screen, was the munitions that they're using are the only things that clearly date the movie. Because the mining town looks like it could have been from 20 years ago. Or
he does this melange of architectures, technology that encompasses 3-4 decades, all across the board, and I think he's not constricted. In the same way that Kiki, there are two things that are very elastic in Miyazaki: exactly when and where it's happening, and the age of the female protagonist.
Right.
Whether it's Kiki or this or Spirited Away, is very elastic. Sometimes they behave like 16, 17-year-olds. Sometimes they behave like 11-year-olds. And this is part of perhaps the inheritance of fairy tale, as it was in Alice and so forth, but it definitely is pretty elastic.
just how predatory those pirates are, you know, as goofy as they are. Yeah.
Because if they are really courting an 11-year-old, it would be kind of creepy.
Kind of. Let's go back to talking about something you have great affinity for, these sort of technologies of the past that are sort of made into the future. What do you think draws the two of you to this idea of is it the moment of the inventor, the moment when science fiction is invented, of course, is Victorian times or contemporary science fiction?
He's very strict about it. You know, he is. I'm fetishistic about it, but he is very strict about it. He says that, for example, there's a subgenre in anime which is very, very popular called mecha, which essentially survives in the fetishist impulse towards machines. You know, and I love retro, but most mecha survives into super sleek designs and so forth. And Miyazaki has always said, I very purposely never threaded on mecha. I could draw mecha. I have drawn mecha. He says, but in my mind, for someone to get into a machine that he didn't build or can repair or basically has earned, makes the fable not interesting to me. He says, for me, for someone to get into a machine needs to be someone that knows how to repair them, knows how to put them together, knows how to take them apart. Otherwise, and you see that in Patsu very clearly.
Yeah.
He's building his own airplane.
Yeah.
He's building machines. He's repairing boilers. So that's an ethic, I think, that comes from Miyazaki, probably following Daddy through the factory of zeros and seeing how he dealt with building a rudder, or, you know, it could come from as early a memory as that.
It's interesting. I mean, in fact, the Papa, the boiler operator in here, basically returns and Spirited Away, but with long arms.
Yes, it is. Well, you can see Miyazaki's old faces are the same, whether it's Yubaba.
Yubaba and Dola are very, very connected.
He has sort of a stock of characters that return in some form or another. Obviously, you see the little fox squirrel from Nausicaa coming back. And I think that's...
which is amazing, by the way, because you know it's going to be okay.
Yes.
You know, as soon as they come, because you're not sure exactly what the robot's intentions are with them. By the way, is it really a robot when it's got like flesh and bone inside?
A geek would say it's a cyborg.
So it's a cyborg.
Because it has organic, but since Miyazaki always says they're not defined, they could be stone, they could be metal, they behave like both.
Yeah.
Who knows what technology was that, you know? Sheeta has a Kiki's dress at some point, or kind of a Kiki's dress. So all those things, but for me, the Miyazaki, like Otomo also shares a fascination with machines that really work, and a fascination with obviously steam technology.
And flying machines too,
Steamboat, But I think that Miyazaki is a guy that really wants to show you things that are plausible or plausibly put together. You know, and he can do it with the way a car behaves in Sherlock Hound or in Rupan, or he can do it by creating this technology. But I think what is marvelous is that design of the robots, which I own every toy ever made of those robots, you know, and it's so simple, and simple is the hardest because they're incredibly expressive. Everybody goes, oh, at some point in the movie. And at the same time, they're really scary. So for them to do all that, I remember, again, Brad Bird, whom I consider a genius of animation and a genius, period. You know, when he was showing me Iron Giant, he said him and Joe Johnston came to the most simple design of the face, where the jaw was eccentric, so it could be a little, but it was basically a line. The eyes were two circles, and where to place those circles in relation to that face, exactly a millimeter in, a millimeter out, makes a huge difference. And then the slats, which could go raised like a smile, or could both lower like paying attention, or would go like this when he goes angry. But to design those robots with such simplicity, incredibly hard. Incredibly hard.
And also, you were talking about it before, this sort of this idea of grace in Miyazaki, that you really feel it when they're rolling out of the arms, when that happens.
And especially with the little flower.
But even on the rooftop, you know, when there's barrage of munitions happening, there still is that fluidity of motion.
and
really
grace
amazing.
in that moment.
Yeah.
And I also love, he does a gesture that I adore, which is this,
Yeah.
It's incredibly beautiful. And I was looking, how Laputa has so many influences, like it looks like the Tower of Babel, the famous painting, and it has elements of all the influences. He's quoting the Ramayana.
I was going to start to ask you about that. I mean, there's so much mythological stuff happening around it, and quite explicitly when Mosca is sort of saying, about the Sodom and Gomorrah and the Ramayana, but even throughout it, her name is Shita. Just to start with, there's all this this stuff, and I guess it keeps coming. You were talking about it before from a Japanese perspective. Is this the one that's sort of the most, do you think, Western absorbed?
Well, you see, Nausicaa has a lot.
does too, yeah.
I think that Miyazaki, some people even claim Totoro is basically an appropriation of the Nordic troll myths, that there is not such a myth per se in Japan. I mean, there are guardians of the forest and so forth. But I think that Miyazaki really is like, I remember, especially early on, when people said, "But what's so Mexican about your movies?" I would say, "Me." What would be impossible is for me not to be Mexican,
Right.
Or for what I do. I mean, whether it's a giant kaiju strangulating with his own umbilical cord, or is Hellboy and Abe Sapien drinking a six-pack of beer while singing Barry Manilow. These are not things that are going to come from the brain of a blockbuster director from America, And I think Miyazaki is the same. Miyazaki is a guy, especially when you think how permeated it is, as we discussed in the beginning, anime is a medium that there's an osmosis between the West and the East in the creation of anime, and the way anime then influences everything. Anime and manga now permeate all the aesthetics. Whether you're watching Cartoon Network or you're watching a pure anime piece, now that aesthetic has permeated everything. So it's great that the wave not only went that way but came back. And seeing it again, there's certain pantomime that is purely anime, the way they run, doing like this, or
Pazu's got this athleticism to him.
but
That's
completely
lovely,
manga
yeah.
or
Yeah.
completely anime.
Yeah.
And when you see the early Tezuka has a lot of those gestures, but it has also a lot of the aesthetics that you can see coming from Disney. And this Miyazaki right here is already sort of free, is operating in that anime code at its finest, But I think this would be impossible without him doing time in Conan, in Sherlock Holmes, in Lupin, and everything.
And we were talking backstage also about the pacing of it. I mean, that's
Incredible.
That's coming. Even after being exposed to Disney, they're not, even at this stage, are not going at that speed.
I think that it's very telling that the sequence in Lupin, in the fight around the clock tower, is tried to be replicated in The Great Mouse Detective in a way, with many more resources and first computer melding onto the animation and so forth. But and he was permeating Disney by then. Lasseter was a big proponent of Miyazaki as one of the greatest from the early inception of that, But it is fascinating to see the pacing, impeccable, and the solutions. None of the solutions is a solution a Western director would do.
Elaborate on that.
For example, the idea to create a fugue in the middle to resurrect the robot, but the robot doesn't rescue her.
Right.
In a Western movie, you would have the big payoff of the robot flying with her with an explosion behind.
Right.
In the trailer, or you would that there is futility in the gestures. The fact that the robot is imperfect, is lacking a leg. Oh my God, get that through a studio. And then he flies and he hits the stone wrong and crawls. I mean, there is absolutely an idiosyncrasy that comes from a guy that has been raised in a different application of narrative. So you can have the rhythm of an American blockbuster in the sense of efficiency and this and that. And this is very telling also. Miyazaki, whenever he quotes examples, especially in his early manifestos, he talks about John Ford. He talks
Really?
about Howard Hawks.
Okay.
He talks about Buster Keaton. So you can see him drinking from. He talks about Gary Cooper. You know, he talks about so many things that you realize he's drinking from those highly efficient American storytelling things. But as we discussed, there are many failed gestures here. You know, the fact that Sheeta needs to raise her braids in order to tie this, or or Patsu fails to connect them, or there's a lot
They can't undo the rope.
They cannot undo the rope, and what does he do? Run with her with the rope. These things are when people say what is so Japanese about the early Miyazaki, obviously is
these gestures.
And the rhythm, again, other things, simply the way he applies it to the villains. The villains, turning the villains into heroes, all that, etc., etc., etc. Making the interlude about the courtship in the ship, which is a scene that never fails to make me laugh. When all the pirates knock and each one, it's amazing.
It does feel like something out of Preston Sturges or like 30s comedies, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Do you have, in terms of like how Miyazaki, I mean, this is now, been with us, this work's been with us for some time. How do you think that Miyazaki's been permeating the current scene? I mean, obviously you've said that you've taken an influence as well, but where else do you see him in contemporary film?
Well, again, you saw it in the early Disney, the way he started influencing things like Great Mouse Detective. You see him influencing. There's a lot of dictums from Miyazaki that you can see in Pixar. There's literally a quote or a riff on Sheeta being rescued in Bug's Life, literally.
Oh yeah.
Quite simply. I think that some of the aesthetics of even in DreamWorks, you can see it in How to Train Your Dragon. Any animator worth his or her salt is somewhat affected by Miyazaki. In Japan, entire series are Miyazaki-like. And by the same token, some people define themselves by opposition to Miyazaki. I mean, it's very hard.
Like who?
Very pointedly, Mamoru Oshii.
Right.
Mamoru Oshii, who worked closely with Miyazaki and Takahata for a little bit. In fact, Miyazaki talks about the first person to see his sketches of the Wales countryside was Mamoru Oshii. And he said he knew he could convince the audience that, because he drew those big holes that are in the ground that look like craters. And he showed them, and Mamoru Oshii said, oh, so that's how Wales looks like. And he thought, I'm going to be able to get away with it, because he's a fictional Wales, obviously.
Yeah, obviously.
And Oshii has come to, Oshii is a bit like a steampunk, like a cyberpunk.
Yeah, I mean, nothing looks Victorian. Everything looks super futuristic.
Super edgy,
Yeah.
Incredibly anarchic,
Yeah.
very much an iconoclast in many ways. And he sees Miyazaki as and Ghibli as an animation style that has just been repeating it for the last 10 years and so forth. I couldn't disagree more, but certainly some people like to, in the way that animators in the 60s and 70s defined themselves against Disney. Ralph Bakshi or this and that.
Chuck Jones,
You say, the punk needs to create or identify an establishment to rebel against it. And some animators see Ghibli as more the establishment of animation. But when you compare them, or when you put them in the arena of the world, that is not true.
Right.
They're still there's no. They cannot be the establishment and create Spirited Away. I don't think.
I don't think so either.
Or a work that stands entirely alone in the history of animation, like Totoro. I mean, there is no other movie like it, period. Exactly. And I think movies function at three levels that are really the result of accidents. Jorge Luis Borges used to say, you cannot plan a masterpiece. And he's right. I mean, I don't think you can. And when you see a movie works in the way the creator thinks it works. And Miyazaki very, very pointedly also says that one of the things he defines right away, contrary to many, many Western directors would like to admit, is the theme. And that the theme clarifies the movie for him. So that's the movie he thinks he's saying. The other movie is the movie that, by compulsion, he is telling. That's different. It's all the stuff
telling over and over again.
That all the stuff that he's fetishistic about that returns to because he wants to. It's like the way you crave food or crave something kinky in your life, whatever it is. It's the same. That's the second. And the last one is the thing that no one can explain. It's when the movie does something to you and to the world and fills a gap that is unique and no other movie can replace it. And Totoro is that.
Are there any times in Miyazaki where you think he misses the mark, where he doesn't quite get it?
Oh my God. Well, let me tell you first about Orson Welles. I mean, how can you criticize? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like,
you want to be on this stage and doing that?
No, I would not. I'm a very simple creature. What I say in this stage, I would say at dinner.
Okay.
I can't. I mean, there is.
Because the universe is so complete.
I'm in awe of the guy. I mean, how can you say Picasso got the perspective wrong? Right. A nude descending the stairs. And it doesn't look like a nude, and it doesn't look like a stair. Shut up. Shut the fuck up. Is what I want to say. I don't think it's possible. I mean, this guy operates at a level that is completely different from any mortal can operate. I mean, he truly is the result of decades of discipline, at a level of discipline that it's impossible to imagine in the West, by the way. When he was talking about Conan, and this is where we talk again about the design of the faces, when they ask him what does he think about the first episode of Conan, and he says, I hated it. I wanted to hang myself. He said, because the face of the girl was supposed to be defined who the girl was the moment you saw her. And it was supposed to be a depuration of the most beautiful face I could create. And it was so horrible. And you see the anime and you go, really? But this is, in my opinion, both Conan is now Patsu. And he defines the girl now through Shita. And the depuration is incredible.
You think the Shita is the creation of his girl character, kind of the full flowering of it for the first time?
When you see that design of that face, the angling of the eyebrows, the little curl here down and then here, I mean, it's so incredibly difficult. Those faces, there are some people that, believe it or not, don't watch anime, and they hate it. Some people hate anime. None of them are here, but they say they all look alike,
right?
And you cannot help but feel sorry for them. And they must think Mexicans all look alike, and they must think Japanese people all look alike. It's amazing to me that there is such an ism, which is stupidism, I think, racism, stupidism, but because those two faces grab them, study them, and marvel. I mean, it's incredible.
It's funny. It's almost like that you see them for the first time, and then the rest of the movie allows your instincts to play out. That you knew what you think you knew when you first saw them suddenly comes to fruition as you see the strength of character, their vulnerabilities, their strengths.
If you let me put it in an even more strict way, if they don't have those faces, those characters don't work.
Right.
It's as simple as that. Or the villain, Muska. If he is not, because you can say, first thing you notice, he's not ugly, but he's incredibly evil, and he's incredibly intelligent. I mean, to design Muska and to make a symphony of faces, which is another thing that is incredibly difficult. The symphony of faces, the old man in the mines, which is very different an old man than any other old character that appears in the film. The pirates, blah, 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 who become almost expressionistic painting, like two mustaches and a Peter Lorre pair of eyes. Is really to create that symphony and make it feel a world. and the way things echo accidentally or on purpose, things like the pirate ship echoes the robot in a very strange way, same proportions and this and that. I mean, it's staggering, and it's not simple at all. You know, to do that with that simplicity is incredibly difficult.
I think we're going to turn it over to you guys now. We have some mics coming, so I think you see them there. See one down here. Go ahead.
Thanks. Now that Miyazaki's retiring, what do you see as the future of the studio? His son's work has been a bit uneven.
Well, no, you know, I'm not gonna have tea with them tomorrow, or I mean, I don't know, but as a fan, I think that they are grooming a new generation. You know, you could see it on Arrietty. You know, you could see it. They are Takahata obviously goes in very experimental directions here and there, like the Yamadas, for example. You know?
There's some kooky stuff in it.
Yeah, so I think that it's very, very hard to imagine that Miyazaki is going to retire from the studio. You know, I think he's going to retire from directing actively, but and I think he means it this time because he has retired several times.
After Mononoke, I mean, it's been the first one I heard.
But
yeah.
I think this time he means it. But I think that when you go to Ghibli, you see that it's a world that is very active, and people are coming up in the ladder, and it's Oshi, who is critical of Ghibli, but at the same time respects them enormously. He said, Ghibli is holding a tradition with which I may agree or not, but which would be incredibly sad if it was lost. Mm-hmm. And no one else is there to pass it to anyone else. So I think Miyazaki at this stage is an elderly statesman, you know, and it's a man that I think it's almost impossible for him, not as an act of ego, but as an act of conscience, not realize that he has a legacy now. As pompous as it may sound in the West, I think in the East, tradition and legacy mean something different.
It's true, too, I guess maybe if by retiring he can actually then mentor someone who has who's taking some of the same kind of dramatic tonal risks that he takes. Because I think maybe that's part of what you were referring to, that sometimes they can see a bit, his son's films, the other films in the studio can sometimes see a bit light.
Yes.
But frothier. And so the serious ones seem to come from the master himself. But maybe this will create space for someone who
And I think Poppy Hill was a big improvement over the first film. And I think that Arrietty has some of the characteristics that you identify with a Ghibli film of quality and weight and so forth. So, you know, it's certainly a unique place in the world. And if anyone ever can go and visit the Ghibli Museum in Japan, is an amazing experience. Is the only museum where I've just started weeping when we saw the zoetrope. My wife and I started just weeping actively.
What's the zoetrope?
They have a zoetrope, the size of it's like the size of a car, and it's all the 3D figures sculpted of Totoro jumping with the umbrella, Mei and Satsuki pulling the seeds, the bats flying, the cat bus running, and it's all arranged with three-dimensional figures. And then they start turning it, and you start strobing, and all of a sudden you're in front of a miniature world that is animated right in front of you, and you start weeping.
If you have a heart.
If you have a heart.
Go ahead, sir.
All right. We were talking about Miyazaki kind of in his age and stuff, but I've realized that he really likes old people in addition to old technology and old things in his movies. But his perspective on, the elderly has kind of changed from the kind of old folks home that we have in Ponyo this is one of his earlier films, and yet there's still old people. Dola is pretty much like Han Solo's evil grandmother, right? But we have a pirate, but it's not a young strapping pirate. It's an old lady and her family, like an Adam West Batman family, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Right? So, where has that kind of idea of old people as heroes, not just mentors, but active heroes, kind of come into play in Miyazaki films and mythos?
Well, yeah, I think that the idea of age in the East unfortunately for me, of weight in the East is very different than in the West. And I think there is, they revere experience. At least the more traditional Japanese society does. I mean, obviously, in the surgeons of Japanese punk and iconoclast, Japan doesn't. But there is, certainly for Miyazaki's generation, who was sort of the last link to chivalry and tradition and this and that, that there is veneration, and you can see it in Totoro. You can see it, in the character of Grandma in Totoro, or even Yubaba, or the fact that one of the most mysterious arcs in Miyazaki is Sophie in Howl, who becomes, she's already demure and meek, and she becomes bolder as she becomes older, So it's a very interesting thing, but it definitely is linked to the East. Howl is one of the movies Miyazaki has done that is more full of ambiguities, and one of the darker movies in a strange way.
Howl's Moving Castle?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And at the same time, he doesn't abandon some of the very, very difficult simplicity. For my wife and my daughters, it's just a movie with a hunk. They just go, Howl.
Howlin' for Howl.
Howlin' for
We're right at the
Howl.
back there, please.
Hi. So one thing that I find super impressive about Ghibli movies, and lots of anime in particular, is that they have very prominent and very strong female characters. With all of the Ghibli movies, as well as magical girl anime series and the like. I know the West, in both live action and animation, is finally starting to. I mean, Pixar just finally had Merida and Brave. Why do you think it took so long for the West to really embrace a strong female protagonist as well as antagonists, the Dola and such?
Well, it's not, Ghibli is also semi-singular at that. Anime has either great female characters or horrible female characters. Either they're underclad nymphets that giggle, or they are great characters. There is such a range in anime. So Ghibli stands also very strongly in the East as a bastion of great female characters. I think that one of the best ones for me is in a movie that Miyazaki was a little resistant to do originally, which was Kiki. Kiki is such a great character, and full of ambiguities and doubts and this and that. And I think in the West, in general, in films, there's the tendency to not embrace great female characters, for actresses that are old, complain about no parts for anyone over 45, blah, blah, blah. And an actress is considered old after 30, but there are no parts for young actresses, just many more, but they're not qualitatively better. Mm-hmm. So it's just, I think in fiction, in audiovisual fiction, more and more you're seeing just the demand for better parts for female characters, because it's about fucking time. You know what I'm saying? It's really.
Live action in Japan, of course, it's always had stronger female characters anyway. And there's always been, you always feel that there's, in the history of cinema, there's been a balance between more male-oriented and female-oriented directors, which did exist in Hollywood, right, back in the 30s and 40s, but then kind of disappeared.
They disappeared for a while, and then great female characters in the 70s in American cinema and so forth. I think that in general, when you talk about an industry, the industry tries to cater to an audience that they fabricate. They say, oh, the audience wants that, really? Because I've seen the audience want other things. Mm-hmm. And it's very hard to be contrarian to that. But you can do it. It can be done. And I think Miyazaki has great, some really, really great female characters.
Absolutely. We got, yep.
Hi.
Hi.
First of all, I just want to say I love your movies, and I think you're really cool.
Thank you.
But
where are you?
Right there.
Oh.
I'll stand up. I'm sorry, I'm short. I'm
sorry, I'm fat.
We'll make a good comedy duo. So throughout Miyazaki's films, there's usually this sense of sort of the foster family, and in Castle in the Sky, clearly they're both orphans, and then they come into this new family through the the matriarch, the patriarch figures. But I found that throughout his works, the foster family always has a really close connection to nature and to elementals. So in this film, Dola is sort of the sky, water elemental, and we mentioned the walrus son, so that's the sea, and then we have I forget his name, but the furnace man in Spirited Away.
Yes.
Papa.
Kawaji? I
Oh,
forget.
Kawaji, you mean
I
Spirited
forget.
Away.
And then again, the furnace and the miner in this film are very connected to nature and the elementals.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering what you think of that sort of why Miyazaki uses those. Like we all know clearly he has these ties to nature, but just what you think of like that in relation to family and relationships.
Well, Miyazaki is born very few years before Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the end of World War II. And this is a time, when you go to Japan, you still see how it's an amalgam of a very old world and an incredibly modern world. It's a clash. And I think that a large portion of the Japanese mind in general is preoccupied and occupied with the confluence of tradition and modernity in general. Whether it's in literature, art, or film, is a constant preoccupation. And I think that what Miyazaki is trying to show is and Takahata to some degree in other of his movies, is the destruction of what was elemental and pure, And in that, again, some of the critics say, the people that are critical of Ghibli, they say that's a retro stance, that is not reactionary and so forth. But that may be the case from a Western mentality, but it's certainly not the case, I believe, in the Eastern mentality. And I think that when you realize this is a culture where there's a spirit for everything. There's a spirit that guards a rock. There's a spirit that guards a plant. There is a spirit basically for everything. Something that I personally share. I think that it's just him trying to say we don't have to live separate from nature, and nature can have a personification. I talk to my car, so I'm not the guy to ask this. I say, take me to work. I'm really very primitive guy.
It is interesting that you brought it up. I thought you might have brought it up before too, before the film. There is that strange moment in the movie where he drops what seems like an atomic bomb into the earth, and it kind of creates a sense of horror that even when all of the soldiers are falling off their ladders and things like that, that's palpably different.
Yes.
And does feel like something very deeply in his consciousness.
Well, there is what is really terrifying about that is that you see the human agency on sort of comprehensible action, the soldiers falling, the robots, and all of a sudden that has an overhuman scale.
Yeah.
It's beyond not only what we imagine, but what we can stop. Patsu with his little gun, is beyond that. Yeah. I think that's, again, I think the kaiju genre was born out of Japan trying to make peace with the aftermath of the first atomic explosion in the world. The first in an act of war. Mm-hmm. And I think that permeates the consciousness. Obviously, anybody that likes or has seen Akira knows that the opening is same thing. Yeah. The way you get to Neo Tokyo is by blasting most of the whole Tokyo. It is very, very alive in that, and I think that is why perhaps what you were saying, that's why the chasm is perhaps the only culture in the world that had a chasm between their past and their future marked by such a marker. Mm-hmm. By such a monumental, apocalyptic, no pun intended, completely straight apocalyptic marker to say that was then, this is now. That is I don't think any other culture experienced that.
We got maybe time for one or two more. I got one there.
Hola, Guillermo, ¿qué tal?
¿Dónde estás?
Por acá.
Hola.
No me está viendo.
¿Ya?
Déjame esperarme.
¿Para dónde?
Aquí.
Right there.
Oh, thank you.
Guillermo, there's any a scene on one of the Miyazaki's work that have you tried to follow in your movies?
Well, I think Totoro was, it changed my life. So, I really don't know if there's a scene, but Totoro is a big inspiration for me. Not only in the way I dress, but Totoro is a big influence because I just love the idea of a narrative that doesn't need the Western justification. Like I hate shooting lines of dialogue that explain the movie. I hate it. In my Spanish language movies, I don't do it. And in the American movies, I find myself going,
You just get sick of arguing with the studio.
Well, also, it always happens. You end up cutting 30, 40 minutes of crap.
Right.
That was just there because they wanted it there, and then you end up cutting it. But I think people, when we go to the movies, we accept that we're going to see something that is self-contained, that operates at a different level of reality. There was a long time where studios said, you cannot do that, the character cannot do that because the audience will never forgive them. Really? Cut to Breaking Bad, they'll forgive anything. They'll forgive anything. But I think it's that sentiment in Miyazaki that I try to emulate, to have, or I was doing it before, but it's not that I'm emulating. I'm comforted by the fact that a man like him can do it. Kronos was like that, Devil's Backbone is like that, Pan's Labyrinth is like that, where I just go, it is because it is.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you, well, the faun was there 100 years, and then the gate was closed, and then a little, and then he... just fucking show me the movie. And tell me the story, and that's it. And I think that's very beautiful. In Totoro, no one ever says, oh, Totoro... if a Western guy had done Totoro, the girls would be racing because they were going to cut a root that links Totoro to the tree, and he's going to die, and if the girls don't stop it, the Totoro is going to die, and they're racing in their skateboards to come in time so the machine doesn't excavate, and Totoro dies, and they cry, and he resurrects, and fuck you. It's horrible. So what is comforting is things. Another thing that is great about Miyazaki is the resolution doesn't have to resolve the whole world.
Yeah.
In Mononoke, the worst characters go unpunished.
Yeah.
The forest god is dead. And they don't have to resolve everything. In Pompoko, the Takahata movie, civilization does destroy the mountain. The Tanuki never go back to the way they were. So, and that's where I go, where I say is that's why I say it's not reactionary for Miyazaki to be preoccupied with the past. To anyone in the West that say that's reactionary, no, because the resolutions do not long for the past as the solution. They make that emotional link, but they don't propose it morally.
So it mourns that it's past, but accepts that it's past.
It's more than mourning. I think it's nostalgia. I mean, one of the things that I shared the strongest with Miyazaki instinctively since I was 7 years old, and I had a sense of loss of a 70-year-old, and the fact that a fable that moves you and is beautiful can also share a huge sense of loss. It has to have it. The best fables in the world have a sense of loss, and Miyazaki understands it. And this is what I think I try. I mean, I'm inspired by him rather than trying to emulate him. I think that the closest I come to a quote is in Hellboy 2 with the elemental.
Yeah.
That was trying to achieve the scale of the forest god, and when he dies,
Or Laputa.
the moss, and the moss covers that. And after Miyazaki, I acquired a completely illegitimate moss fetish, which I continue to this day.
What does a moss fetish include?
I like to put moss in everything. Those would be the only conscious, recognizable moments I would say that I could identify.
Guillermo, thank you so much for being with us today. We're going to
Thank
call
you.
it there.
Good night.
Thank you so much.
See you next time. Thank you.